The sun hadn't fully cleared the horizon when I heard the vehicles coming up our dirt road. 3 black SUVs and 2 patrol cars kicked up clouds of dust that looked like smoke signals announcing disaster. I was feeding the horses when I saw them, my hands frozen mid-scoop in the grain barrel. My father emerged from the barn, wiping grease from his hands, his weathered face turning from curiosity to concern in seconds. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called out, his voice steady despite the tension I could see in his shoulders. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward, flanked by officers with hands resting on their belts. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Gerald Vance from the County Planning Department. We have a cease and desist order for operations on this property." My stomach dropped. Our ranch had been in the Harrison family for 4 generations. 87 years of blood, sweat, and tradition stood on this land. My grandfather built the main barn with his own hands. My grandmother planted the oak trees that now provided shade for our livestock. This was more than property, it was our legacy. "On what grounds?" my father asked, his jaw tightening. "Zoning violations. Multiple structures built without proper permits. Commercial agricultural operations in a residentially zoned area." Vance's voice carried the rehearsed tone of someone who'd delivered this speech before. "You have 72 hours to cease all operations." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "This ranch has been here since 1938. How can there suddenly be zoning violations?" Vance's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Zoning laws evolve, Miss Harrison. The county has to modernize." That's when I understood. This wasn't about zoning at all. That evening, our kitchen table became a war room. My mother spread out deed papers, tax records, and old photographs while my father paced like a caged animal. My younger sister Emma sat quietly, her usually bright eyes dimmed with worry. The smell of untouched coffee filled the air. None of us had appetite for anything. "It doesn't make sense," my mother said, running her finger along a property survey from 1982. "Every structure on this land was inspected and approved. We have the documentation." My father stopped pacing. "It makes perfect sense when you consider who's behind this." I knew exactly who he meant. Uncle Richard, my father's younger brother and our town's current mayor. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since the reading of my grandfather's will. Grandpa Joe had left the ranch entirely to my father, the son who'd actually worked the land. Richard got a cash settlement, which apparently wasn't enough. "He's really doing this?" Emma whispered. "Family?" "Richard stopped being family when he chose power over people," my father said bitterly. "He's wanted this land for years. Kept pushing me to sell so he could bring in developers, build his precious shopping complex." I thought about the town council meetings I'd attended last month. Richard had been pushing hard for economic development, code words for replacing family farms with strip malls and chain restaurants. Several smaller properties had already been acquired through eminent domain after sudden code violations appeared. "We need a lawyer," I said, pulling out my phone. "Someone who understands property law and isn't afraid to stand up to City Hall." My mother looked at me with tired eyes. "Lawyers cost money, sweetheart. Money we've sunk into spring planting." But I was already dialing. If Richard wanted war, he'd get one. Marcus Webb's law office occupied a converted Victorian house on the edge of town, far from the gleaming government buildings downtown. I'd heard about him through the Farmers Co-op, a lawyer who actually cared about protecting agricultural heritage. His receptionist, an elderly woman named Dorothy, smiled warmly when I explained why I'd come. "The Harrison Ranch? I remember when your grandpa used to bring fresh eggs to my mother every Sunday morning," she said, ushering me into Marcus's office. "Good man, your grandpa, salt of the earth." Marcus himself was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too many families lose their land to bureaucratic warfare. He listened without interrupting as I laid out our situation, the sudden cease and desist, the zoning claims, and the uncomfortable truth about my uncle's involvement. Classic land grab disguised as code enforcement, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. I've seen this pattern before. Your uncle changes zoning classifications through council votes, then enforces violations retroactively. Perfectly legal on paper, morally bankrupt in practice. Can we fight it? I asked, gripping the armrest of my chair. We can try, but I'll be honest. Going against a sitting mayor with council support is an uphill battle. We'll need evidence of impropriety. Proof that this zoning change was specifically targeted at your family's property. I thought about the timing. The zoning change had passed just 3 months ago, buried in a larger municipal code update. Nobody had paid attention because it was presented as routine modernization. But now, looking back, the language seemed specifically designed to target established agricultural operations. What do we do first? I asked. Marcus pulled out a legal pad. We document everything. Every conversation, every structure, every piece of correspondence, and we make some noise. The town hall meeting room buzzed with tension that Thursday evening. Word had spread about our situation, and the turnout was larger than usual. Concerned neighbors, fellow farmers, and curious townspeople filled the rows of folding chairs. I sat in the front row with my parents and Marcus, my hands sweating despite the air conditioning. Uncle Richard presided from the raised platform, looking every bit the confident politician in his tailored suit. His eyes swept the room and landed on us briefly, his expression unreadable before he called the meeting to order. Tonight we address concerns regarding the Harrison property enforcement action, he began, his voice carrying that practiced public speaking cadence. I want to assure everyone that the County Planning Department operates fairly and within established guidelines. Marcus stood before Richard could continue. Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, the Harrison family requests permission to present their case directly to the council. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This isn't a court, Mr. Webb. The proper channel for appeals is through the Planning Department. The same department that issued the cease and desist without proper notice? Marcus countered. The Harrison family received their violation notice with a 72-hour deadline. State law requires a minimum of 30 days for property owners to respond to code violations. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Richard's face reddened slightly, but he maintained his composure. If there was an administrative error in notification timing, we can certainly review. It's not just timing, my father interrupted, standing up. His voice shook with controlled anger. Richard, you know this land has been properly operated for nearly 90 years. Every building, every fence, every structure has documentation. You're manufacturing violations to force us out. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd known our family for decades voiced their support. Other farmers expressed concerns about being targeted next. Richard banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. 3 days later, Marcus called with news. I've been digging through public records. Your instincts were right. The timing is too convenient to be coincidence. I met him at his office, where he'd spread documents across his conference table like puzzle pieces. Planning commission minutes, zoning maps, property assessments, and correspondence between various county departments created a paper trail that told a disturbing story. Look at this, Marcus pointed to a zoning map dated 6 months prior. Your property was clearly designated agricultural. Then here, he slid over another map from 3 months ago, suddenly it's residential with agricultural restrictions. But the change wasn't publicized properly. It was bundled into a 70-page municipal code update that nobody actually read. That's intentional obfuscation, I said, my anger rising. Exactly, and look who signed off on the Planning Commission recommendations. He showed me a signature I recognized immediately. Dale Preston, Richard's brother-in-law and head of the Planning Department. It's a family operation, quite literally. But the smoking gun was in the correspondence. Marcus had filed a Freedom of Information Act request and received emails between Preston and Richard discussing clearing the way for the Riverside Development Project, a massive commercial development that would occupy exactly the footprint of our ranch and 3 neighboring properties. Riverside Development, I repeated slowly. Who owns it? Marcus pulled up a corporate registration document. Sheltered under an LLC, but if you dig through the layers of corporate structure, he traced the ownership chain with his finger. The primary beneficiary is Mayor Richard Harrison, holding company established 2 years ago. My uncle had been planning this for 2 years. While sharing holiday dinners and pretending to be family, he'd been orchestrating our destruction. The betrayal burned worse than any legal violation. I couldn't fight Richard alone, and I knew it. That weekend, I drove to every neighboring farm within 10 miles, sharing what Marcus had uncovered. Many had received courtesy inspections from the planning department, early warning signs of coming violations. Tom and Sarah Mitchell ran an organic vegetable operation adjacent to our southern boundary. They'd been farming for 15 years, building their business from nothing into a thriving CSA that fed over 200 families. Sarah poured me coffee in their kitchen, her face grim as I explained the situation. We got a notice last month, Tom admitted. Alleged violation of water runoff regulations. Thing is, we've had our drainage system inspected and approved every year. Suddenly, it's not good enough. Richard's trying to assemble a large parcel, I explained. Your land connects to ours. He needs both properties for his development project. Sarah's hands trembled slightly on her coffee mug. We can't afford a legal battle. We just took out a loan for new greenhouse equipment. That's why we need to stand together, I urged. Individually, we're vulnerable, but if all the affected farms unite, we have a stronger case. It's not about one family, it's a systematic pattern of harassment. Over the next week, I organized a coalition of 7 farming families, all facing similar pressures. Marcus agreed to represent us collectively, which distributed the legal costs. We called ourselves the Agricultural Heritage Alliance, and we made our case public through local media. The newspaper ran our story on the front page. Television cameras showed up at our farms. Social media posts about government overreach and family farm protection went viral within our county. Public opinion, it seemed, wasn't on Richard's side, but I knew my uncle wouldn't back down easily. Men like him never did. The retaliation started subtly. First, our farm's long-standing contract to supply the school district cafeteria was suddenly under review for compliance issues. Then the bank called about our operating loan. Apparently, there were concerns about the property's valuation given the pending code violations. This is financial strangulation, my father said, staring at the bank letter. They're trying to make it impossible to keep operating even before the legal case is resolved. Emma came home from school in tears. Some kids, children of Richard's political allies, had been taunting her about how we'd soon be homeless. Her teacher, the daughter of a council member, had done nothing to intervene. The pressure extended beyond our family. Tom Mitchell reported that his liability insurance had been canceled without explanation. Sarah's CSA members started receiving anonymous letters claiming their vegetables might be contaminated due to code violations. Fear is a powerful weapon when wielded correctly. Marcus filed emergency motions for injunctive relief, arguing that the county's actions were causing irreparable harm before any legal hearing occurred. But the county judge, appointed with Richard's recommendation, seemed disinclined to interfere with municipal code enforcement. We need leverage, Marcus said during a strategy session in our living room. Something that makes Richard more afraid of continuing than of backing down. I'd been thinking about that. Richard's political career was built on his image as a family man who cared about the community. But his development deal with out-of-state investors told a different story. If people understood he was selling out local heritage for personal profit, his political capital would evaporate. We need to expose the Riverside development deal, I said. Show voters exactly who benefits from these farm closures. My mother looked worried. Going after Richard publicly means burning every bridge. Making this truly irreparable. I met her eyes steadily. He burned those bridges when he sent cops to our door. Marcus connected me with Julia Santos, an investigative journalist from the state capitol who specialized in municipal corruption cases. She arrived at our farm on a cloudy Tuesday morning, her camera equipment and recording devices suggesting she meant business. "I've been following small-town land grabs for 3 years," Julia explained as we walked the property. "Same pattern everywhere. Sudden code enforcement, political connections to development companies, families losing generational land. Your case has all the markers." She interviewed my father about the ranch's history, photographing old permits and construction records that proved our compliance. She spoke with neighbors who'd faced similar pressure. But her real interest was in following the money trail of Riverside Development. "LLCs are designed to obscure ownership," Julia said, reviewing the corporate documents Marcus had obtained. "But money has to move somewhere. Bank transfers, investor agreements, tax filings. There's always a paper trail if you dig deep enough." She filed public records requests with the State Corporation Commission, obtaining annual reports and registered agent information. She contacted construction companies that had bid on the Riverside project, finding several willing to share details about the timeline and scope. The picture that emerged was damning. Richards LLC had secured financing from a real estate investment firm based in Chicago, the same firm that had funded 3 other controversial developments in our region. They specialized in acquiring agricultural land, rezoning it, and flipping it for massive profits. The investors expected returns within 5 years, which explained Richard's aggressive timeline. "Your uncle stands to make approximately $40 million if this development proceeds," Julia revealed. "He's already received a $2 million advance against future profits." $2 million. While we struggled to make payroll and maintain equipment, Richard had pocketed enough money to retire comfortably. The betrayal somehow hurt even more knowing the exact price of his loyalty. Julia's article dropped on a Sunday morning, and by noon it had been shared thousands of times across social media. "Mayor's secret development deal threatens family farms," read the headline, accompanied by photos of our ranch contrasted with artist renderings of the proposed shopping complex. The reaction was swift and fierce. Local residents who'd been ambivalent about zoning disputes suddenly understood the stakes. This wasn't about code compliance, it was about corporate greed, displacing community heritage. Comment sections filled with outraged responses. The mayor's office phone lines jammed with calls. By Monday, protesters had gathered outside Town Hall carrying signs reading "Save Our Farms" and "Family Over Profit." Local television crews interviewed farmers, historians, and longtime residents who spoke about the importance of preserving agricultural land. The narrative had shifted dramatically in our favor. Richard tried to control the damage through a hastily arranged press conference. Standing behind a podium with the town seal, he insisted the development would bring jobs and economic growth. He characterized his investment as a normal business venture and claimed the zoning enforcement was handled entirely by the planning department without his involvement. But Julia had done her homework. She stood up during the Q&A portion with documents in hand. "Mr. Mayor, you claim you weren't involved in enforcement decisions, yet I have emails showing you personally requested expedited processing of the Harrison property violation. You also attended closed-door meetings with the Planning Commission where specific properties were discussed. How do you explain that?" Richard's face turned red. He deflected, accused Julia of taking things out of context, and ended the press conference abruptly. But the damage was done. The public had seen him cornered and defensive, never a good look for a politician. That night, 2 council members who'd previously supported Richard called Marcus privately. They wanted to discuss a resolution. The tide, it seemed, was turning. The settlement offer came through official channels. A formal letter from the county attorney proposing to withdraw all code violations in exchange for our agreement not to pursue legal action against Richard or the county. They'd even pay our legal fees to date. "It's a good offer," Marcus admitted when we met to discuss it. "You get to keep your land and avoid years of expensive litigation. They're essentially admitting defeat without formally admitting wrongdoing." My father wanted to accept immediately. The stress had aged him visibly over the past weeks. New lines on his face, gray spreading through his hair. "We can go back to normal," he said hopefully. "Just farm in peace." But I couldn't shake my anger. What about the next family? If Richard faces no consequences, he'll just try this again somewhere else. We have the evidence to actually hold him accountable. My mother placed her hand over mine. "Sweetheart, accountability is expensive. Moral victories don't pay bills or plant crops. Sometimes winning means knowing when to accept the win you're offered." Emma, surprisingly, sided with me. "If we take the settlement, Richard stays mayor. He still has all that power. Maybe we should push further." Marcus laid out the realities. Pursuing criminal charges or a civil lawsuit against Richard personally would require substantial resources. The evidence was strong but not guaranteed to result in prosecution. Meanwhile, our farm was already behind on seasonal work, our finances strained by legal costs. "There's also the exhaustion factor," Marcus said gently. "Fighting powerful people takes enormous emotional energy. Sometimes the smart play is securing what you need most, your land, and walking away." I spent that night on our porch, watching stars emerge over familiar fields. Generations of my family had walked this land, built their lives here. Maybe protecting that future was enough. Maybe I didn't need revenge, just peace. By morning, I'd made my decision. I walked into Marcus's office with a proposal. "We'll accept the settlement with additional terms. Richard must resign as mayor, the zoning changes affecting agricultural properties must be reversed, and there must be a public apology acknowledging wrongdoing." Marcus whistled low. "That's aggressive. They might walk away entirely." "Then let them. But I won't accept a deal that lets Richard keep his power and respectability. He tried to destroy my family. There have to be consequences." Marcus drafted the counteroffer, and we waited. 3 days passed with no response. I wondered if I'd overplayed our hand, if my pride would cost us the settlement entirely. My father didn't speak to me much during those days. His disappointment was clear. Then Julia called. "You need to see the news." I pulled up the State Attorney General's website. They'd announced an investigation into municipal corruption and improper land use enforcement in several counties, including ours. Richard's name appeared prominently in the press release, along with descriptions of the Riverside development scheme. "How did this happen?" I asked Julia. "I may have shared my research with certain state officials who've been looking for test cases," she said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "Sometimes justice needs a little push." With criminal investigation looming, Richard's position became untenable. The county attorney called Marcus the next morning. They'd accept all our terms, including Richard's resignation. He'd announce it as stepping down to focus on family within the week, and the council would immediately reverse the problematic zoning changes. "You won," Marcus said simply, "completely and totally." But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving something that never should have happened. My uncle, my father's brother, had chosen money over family. That betrayal would never fully heal, regardless of any legal outcome. Richard's resignation speech was brief and carefully worded by lawyers. Standing at the town hall podium, he announced he was stepping down to pursue private business interests and spend more time with family. He thanked the community for their support, made no mention of the investigation or our case, and walked away without taking questions. I watched from the back of the room, my emotions complicated. This man had taught me to ride a bike when I was 7. He'd attended my high school graduation, hugged me proudly. Somewhere along the way, ambition had rotted something essential inside him. Power and money had become more important than the people who loved him. After the speech, he walked past me without making eye contact. My father stood beside me, his face unreadable. For a moment, I thought Richard might stop, might say something. An apology, an explanation, anything. But he kept walking, surrounded by the few remaining allies who hadn't abandoned him yet. "Do you think he regrets it?" Emma asked quietly. "I think he regrets getting caught," I said. "That's not the same thing." The council appointed an interim mayor and immediately set about reversing Richard's problematic policies. The Agricultural Heritage Alliance worked with the new planning director to establish protections for family farms, ensuring code enforcement would follow proper procedures. Other families who'd been targeted received relief. Tom and Sarah Mitchell hosted a celebration dinner for everyone involved in the fight. 7 farming families gathered in their barn, sharing food and stories, relieved to have preserved our way of life. Julia came too, already working on a follow-up story about grassroots resistance to development pressure. "You started something bigger than just saving your own land," Julia told me. "Other communities are watching, learning from how you fought back." Maybe that was true. But mostly I was just grateful to go home. The first morning without legal threats hanging over us felt surreal. I walked to the barn before dawn, the familiar rhythm of farm work welcoming me back. The horses needed feeding, fences needed mending, and the spring planting was behind schedule. Normal problems felt like luxuries. My father worked beside me in companionable silence. We'd spoken little about Richard since the resignation. The wound was still too fresh. But gradually, as we repaired a section of fence destroyed by winter storms, he began to talk. "I keep thinking about when we were kids," he said, hammering a new post into place. Richard was always competitive, always needed to prove he was better at everything. I thought he'd outgrow it. "Some people never do," I offered. My father knew. That's why he left the ranch to me. He saw something in Richard that I didn't want to believe was there. He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I'm sorry I doubted you. When you wanted to fight instead of settling, I thought you were being stubborn. But you understood something I didn't. That some battles are about more than just winning. They're about what you're willing to stand up for." We worked until the afternoon sun grew too hot, then sat in the barn's shade drinking ice water. Emma brought out sandwiches, and my mother joined us. We ate together, our family intact, our land secure. It was enough. The investigation into Richard continued. Word around town suggested plea deal negotiations, though nothing official had been announced. Several council members who'd supported his policies had chosen not to run for re-election. The political landscape was shifting, slowly but surely. Julia's article won a state journalism award and sparked similar investigations in 3 other counties. Families facing development pressure reached out to us for advice. We shared everything we'd learned about coalition building, media strategy, and legal tactics. Our ranch would never be just a farm again. It had become a symbol of resistance, of families refusing to be bullied off their land. That carried responsibility, but also hope. 6 months later, I stood at my grandfather's grave, fresh flowers in hand. The oak trees he'd planted decades ago rustled in the summer breeze, their leaves creating dappled shadows across the old headstones. I told him about everything, the fight, the victory, the cost. "We saved it, Grandpa," I whispered. "The ranch is safe." I imagined he'd be proud, though maybe disappointed about Richard. Family betrayal cuts deep, even after death. But he'd also understand that sometimes protecting what you love requires fighting people you wish you didn't have to fight. The ranch had changed in subtle ways. We'd installed a historical marker near the road, documenting 4 generations of Harrison family farming. School groups visited occasionally for educational tours. We'd become part of a larger conversation about agricultural preservation and community heritage. Richard moved out of state shortly after reaching a plea agreement that avoided prison time, but included substantial fines and permanent ban from holding public office. I heard through relatives that he'd started over somewhere in Arizona, working for a real estate firm. My father never spoke of him. Emma had decided to study agricultural law in college, inspired by Marcus and our experience. She wanted to help other families navigate the complex intersection of farming and government regulation. Watching her passion develop from our struggle felt like finding purpose in pain. My mother resumed her farmer's market business, selling our products directly to customers who appreciated the story behind the food. Our customer base had actually grown. People wanted to support the farm that had fought back and won. As for me, I finally understood what my grandfather must have known when he walked these fields. This land wasn't just dirt and crops. It was identity, continuity, resistance. It was the stubborn refusal to let progress mean destruction. Every morning I woke up here felt like defiance and victory combined. The sun set over our western pastures, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Cattle grazed peacefully, horses dozed in their paddocks, and somewhere in the house my family was preparing dinner. Ordinary moments, extraordinary in their preservation. We'd fought for this, we'd won this, and we'd never take it for granted again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it resonated with you, whether you're from a farming community, a small town, or anywhere people stand up for what matters. Please write in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I love knowing this story reaches people everywhere, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel for more true stories about families, justice, and never giving up. Until next time, take care.